started, I was going to have Senator Hodges do an invocation for us. Are you number 12? Go ahead.
Would you pray with me, please? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for this beautiful state in which we live. Thank you for all the blessings you've bestowed upon us, Lord, especially the opportunity to be here today and to tend to the affairs of our state. Please lead us and guide us in all we do and give us your wisdom. These things we ask in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. So we had two bills, and I listed them as hearing only because they were just so new to us, but was trying to stay ahead of it before the horde of bills from Ways and Means gets over here later on, as it does every year. The first bill is by Senator Beach. If you want to come up to the front here and present it to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's make sure give us the LC number and.
Okay, it is Senate Bill 153, LC 432625.
Okay.
And I wanted to also ask Nate Bailey to come on up here, and he's going to testify also. But I'm going to just run through what the bill does. First off, thank you for hearing this bill, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This is my first time to be in the Finance Committee and present, so I appreciate that. Basically what this is, it's very similar to the hotel motel tax that counties and cities and municipalities can introduce and have. This authorizes each county and municipality that is host to a venue with more than 9,500 seats to levy a local excise tax for public safety capital improvements, not salaries or anything, just capital improvements. So, you know, an eligible venue is defined as any stadium, arena, amphitheater, or other venue that is open to the public in the state with a capacity of 9,500 seats. So, for example, in my district, Alpharetta, we have the Ameris Bank Amphitheater. It's 12,500 seats. So they would be eligible to do this excise tax. Now, here's what they can impose. A city can impose up to 2% excise tax on the original ticket sale. So this isn't StubHub or secondary market tickets. It's just the original ticket sale. So nothing on the secondary market. A county can impose up to 1% excise tax on the original sales ticket. So the max is 3%. Okay, so again, for example, in my district, the Ameris Amphitheater has a rated capacity of 12,800 seats. So the city of Alpharetta could impose a 2% tax and Fulton County could impose a 1% tax. The funds that are raised from this excise tax can only be spent on public safety capital improvements, fire trucks, police cars, fire stations, police stations. So that's what this is all about, to make sure that we have the proper equipment. God forbid a fire happened at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, that they have the ladder trucks and the equipment to go there and do what they need to do. Because of COVID and so on, a lot of these budgets have been cut, and so we need to make sure we're funding our capital equipment. Councilman Dustin Hillis has passed a resolution supporting this with the City Council of Alpharetta, and I'm going to introduce Nate Bailey. And Nate, if you could just tell him what you do, your job and what you do, and then talk to him about the need for this. And
sure. Thank you, Senator. I want to thank you for sponsoring the bill, as well as Senator Albers and the others. This has been 3 or 4 years in the making, you know, for us in Atlanta. And now that I'm president of the state, I reached out to other firefighters across the state and asked them, you know, what shortcomings they were having with equipment or other issues. And the capital cost of fire equipment has just skyrocketed. Not just so for the, you know, because of the pandemic, but in general, a fire engine 20 years ago was $250,000. Today it's $800,000. You know, a ladder truck was $500,000, and now it's $1.3 million. So to keep up with those costs, it's, you know, draining a lot of budgets. And now they used to last 20 years. They're about 7 to 10 years on the life cycle of these new apparatus. So we tried to explore what were other states doing, other cities. Ohio has an admission tax. It goes to arts and entertainment. I think Georgia's pretty good on arts and entertainment. You know, our shortcoming was more public safety capital. So then we started exploring it with our city council members, and I had other firefighters reach out to their commissioners and council members to see if they would support it. You know, starting this, I want to make sure that people will support it before we start doing all the legwork and pulling data and numbers. And we actually did some kind of micro polling in Atlanta, and that's where we really focused in on the language that Senator Beach put in there, where it has to be for specific items, because the citizens said, we'll always support, you know, you guys getting fire trucks and equipment, but we want to make sure that if we're giving extra money, it's going to those specific items. So I appreciate Senator Beach putting that language in there, just to kind of build more trust with the citizens, if you all will support this bill. And just to give you some background on how many people would respond to Mercedes-Benz or State Farm or any high occupancy venue, it's around 46 firefighters to an initial alarm. And I believe around the first alarm would be 8 million in apparatus alone. If there's a confirmed fire, it would be another 8 million in just apparatus that we would be sending in Atlanta. So that's $16 million worth of equipment. And we had a fire last March on the roof of Mercedes-Benz. Had a significant fire in the Georgia Dome in 2017. We've had multiple fires in State Farm Arena. So there are events that happen. It benefits the venue, because if we don't extinguish the fire, not only do they have to repair millions in damage, they lose all the concerts and events, which would bring in sales tax to the state. So it's definitely a benefit. The insurance benefit for the venues, I couldn't find any insurance information about the state venues. I don't know if they're self-insured. If they are, that would be even more reason for the state to support this, because the cost to repair, and then the cost of the loss of the sales tax if they were closed for a certain amount of time. So how does this relate to Atlanta or other cities or large counties across the state that have venues? On an average day, Engine 1 runs 15 calls. When there's an event at Mercedes-Benz, they run about 30 calls. And Engine 6, which also protects the Capitol, it runs the same, about 15 calls a day. And then when there's an event downtown, they run about 30. So those are two of the busiest engines in the country, right here in the capital city. And the call volume, the extra calls, those busy days are always when we have major events in the city. So when we're taking all that apparatus away from the tax-paying citizens, it depletes a lot of our resources. Our minimum staffing is 159 in the city. If there's a second alarm called to any of these major venues, it requires up to 100 firefighters. So we majorly deplete our staffing if we have an incident at one of those venues. You're sending about 17 million just in salaries and equipment also. Again, that's annual, but I don't want to break it up over per call, but just the salaries of the people on the apparatus with all of the specialized equipment. One of the benefits, if they do have insurance, is our insurance rating in Atlanta is ISO 1. It's the highest, and we worked very hard to get that, but it requires a lot of staffing and a lot of equipment. If that goes down 2, 3, 4, the insurance rates of these venues will skyrocket. So another benefit for the venues and stakeholders to want to get on board with the bill. There was a fire at Mile High Stadium last year, millions in damage, and they had to cancel some of the events, which was a loss for the city. It would be, again, a huge financial impact if a venue must close due to fire damage. And that's just talking about the fires. We haven't talked about mass casualty incidents. Astro World in Houston, 10 people lost their lives. Houston fires saved hundreds, and they evacuated thousands from that event. That takes an enormous amount of resources. If there were a true event like that, mass casualty, we would deplete all our resources. And then we would have to call mutual aid with other departments, locally to handle all the patients. So our population's 525,000. On event day, it's 1 to 1.5 million. You all are aware of that. But it does bring in sales tax, but the hotel motel tax kind of goes back to those venues a lot. So how do we pay for all this equipment, especially when it's quadrupled? No city and county budget's quadrupled in the last 20 years. So that's when we started exploring, how are we going to pay for these trucks? So we started looking at other states and cities, and the admission tax was what we came up with. And somebody brought up the stadiums for the colleges. Florida has a paid agreement with Gainesville. Oxford has a paid agreement with the University of Mississippi. Most colleges have a paid agreement with their city or county. We don't do that in Georgia. But as the footprints have grown of these universities, if you have a lot of tax-exempt institutions, who's going to pay for the services? Georgia Tech and Georgia State have robust police departments, but where their fire, hazmat, and technical rescue team, there are some days where one of our fire stations only responds to tech. and it's still a busy engine company. So,
I guess I'm more interested in the bill itself than, I mean, I know we've got fires, I know we're gonna have to deal with them, but the bill itself is really what I want to talk more about.
okay.
One question that we may have, is, and I haven't talked to Ledge Council because we just got this yesterday. I wanted to go ahead and get a hearing on it. But, the issue of is it, can we start this in the Senate versus the House? You know, they may disagree with that. So we'll probably want to talk to Ledge Council about that issue. And then, is this just, there's no voting on this. This is just a vote by the commission in this bill. Is that the way I understand it?
I believe so. Like when the city of Alpharetta established the hotel motel tax, it was the city council that did that, but the state legislature allowed them to do that with a bill like this. And then they implemented that, and there were some parameters of what that money had to be spent on. They did not have to do a hotel motel tax. Like, I'm not sure, Senator Dolezal, if Forsyth County even does that. I don't know that y'all have a hotel motel tax. But
Okay, well, let me go ahead to
but-
Senator Estevez. I think
Yeah.
you've got a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to, and Mr. Bailey, thank you for your service. You're an active fighter, which is
Yes.
why he focused so much on fires. So thank you for your service
Thank you.
to the city. And Senator Beach, thank you for bringing this bill. I have a question about something that Mr. Bailey brought up at the end, which is the tax exempt properties. We think about universities, but you also think about Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is also tax exempt. There's a lot of costs that go into that, into protecting those areas. Are there any other streams of revenue for municipalities or counties that could help support this aside from this tax? Are you aware of any?
I'm not. And I will say this, if you look across our state, I'm not sure we have any stadium that is owned privately. I think, you know, like the amphitheater in Alpharetta, the city of Alpharetta owns that 26 acres. They do $1 a year lease to Woodruff Arts Center, and Woodruff runs it, but the city owns that land. And I think same with Mercedes-Benz. World Congress Center owns that property, and Mercedes-Benz and the Falcons get to run it and sell the concessions and so on. But I'm not sure that we have any stadiums that are privately owned in the state. I'm not sure, but I would tell you that if we do, it's very few. Most of them are owned by either authorities or municipalities or so on.
Yeah, something else we may need to check on. Senator Hickman, you were next, I
Yes,
believe.
sir. Thank y'all again for bringing this. I'm just curious one thing. Where did the 9,500, how did you come up with 9,500 versus 6,500 or whatever?
We looked at a lot of the cities, you know, where would the venues qualify? We didn't want to go too low because then you get into smaller businesses, smaller venues. 9,500 is, I believe, the Savannah Arena cutoff, and then after that it goes down to 8,000, 7,000, 6,000. So we wanted to have a cutoff somewhere where it would be a much larger venue that would require, you know, a lot of resources.
So really not a whole lot of reason for doing that, and it's just kind of just an estimate.
Yes, just we wanted to create some type of threshold.
Okay, I'd like to see it a little bit lower than that, quite honestly. So that's why I asked.
All right, our appropriations chair, I believe, was next. He may just be coming up with the money to do all this. We'll see what he says.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually want to, I don't know if it's more of a statement than it's a question. But
I think your mic, are you on, which one are you on?
number one.
It just mashed down. Okay, now
Is
it's
that-
working.
It may be more of a statement than a question. I appreciate you bringing the bill. I understand what you're trying to accomplish. But I wonder if we're actually acting in some ways kind of against ourselves on another bill that's not your bill here today. And if you remember, even last year, I think it was, I don't remember the exact House bill, but we've done it 5 or 6 times in OCGA 4883, where we keep passing exemptions for sales of admissions for non-reoccurring sporting events, major sporting events. So we're actually taking the state tax off, and now we're going to have a bill before us to put a new local tax on. And I think that's a little bit ironic in our actions, and maybe we need to, again, it kind of goes to the larger discussion I think this committee's been having about exemptions generally. It's not a comment on your bill specifically, but let's make sure our actions are congruent. as we move forward with this committee.
Duly noted.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chair Beach, for bringing this. Thank you as well for your service. I do have a couple of questions as I'm kind of processing this. Can you tell me again the cost you said for I think you mentioned a ladder truck or something?
Today's cost would be 1.3 million.
Okay. So just in some back of the napkin math here, thinking about an NFL football game, average ticket price $150, 70,000 tickets sold. That would generate $315,000 per game for every sold out game. Let's call it 8 sold out games a year. We're talking about $2.5 million. I'm wondering a couple things. One, if this project list that's mentioned in line 64 to 65, all those need to be renewed at some interval so that people understand where the funding goes. Because if this tax gets implemented and exists in perpetuity, whatever the particularity, and Mr. Chairman, I'm impressed with the multi-syllable word there, but particularity that you used in your bill, that obviously isn't going to apply in 2035. The other thing I'm worried about, thinking about Sanford Stadium, how would this apply to consolidated county and city governments? Would it be the full 3%? If it is, then by my math, we're generating about $1 million a year in tax just from the football stadium. And I'm wondering if we actually outpace your need for funding at the current percentages that this is. I don't know what you're, because essentially at a football game, you're buying 1.5 to 2 ladder trucks a year just generated from the revenue here. So I'm sure you guys have modeled these numbers out to see what the revenue would be. So I guess that's to finally put all this in question, taking the city of Atlanta, County of Fulton, which actually captures Senator Ameris Bank, as well as State Farm Arena, as well as Mercedes-Benz Stadium. What are you projecting the county piece of this revenue to be on a given year?
The last year we did the math, I think it was on 2019 numbers. On a low number, you might be looking at 14, 15 million. On high, 100% sellouts, maybe 25 million total. That's all total 3%. So whatever 2% of that would be, and then the county would get, probably $7 to $10 million annually.
Okay. And do you know the answer, Senator, and how this would work for Athens Clark? Would they be as a consolidated, another kind of would they qualify for 3%?
Well, I would think so. I would think that's what the hotel motel tax probably, how that works in a consolidated government. But I don't know that answer, but I would think that would.
Thank you.
All right, our Vice Chair, Senator Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for coming and including me as part of the bill. I'm always proud to support our fellow firefighters and first responders. Senator Tillery brought up a really good point. I actually carried the bill that exempted taxes so we could win things like the Super Bowl because they actually mandate that. But I do think that we do have to come with some consensus to make that work. So I think it's a really valid point. I think if we look at this, Senator Dolezal's bringing up a good point too, as how do we balance that, because the need will be very different, I believe, for a Sanford Stadium as an example than it is a Mercedes-Benz Stadium for a lot of other reasons. And I think as we're going through the process of learning what the best way to do with this is, we should figure out, does some of those dollars also need to maybe go, we are always looking for the police officer annuity pension fund, the firefighter pension fund, right? And if we reach a certain threshold, that there's only so many times that we're going to replace a fire engine, a fire truck, or a patrol car, right? Is that either training or to other areas that will help with first responders? Because this is really a user fee, right? It's exactly what this is, right? People come in and they are going to put a big strain on resources in order to do those things. So it's try to recuperate back from what exactly happened. It's dissimilar to any of us when we go get gas in our cars, right? We're paying that tax because that tax pays for the roads of which we're driving on our car. So I think that we ought to continue maybe to vet this out a little further and see where those buckets may line up to make sure that whatever this ends up becoming, right, I think this is a great opportunity for us, fits in all the criteria we want, because fire engines and fire trucks are very important. Patrol cars are very important, but if we don't have the men and women to get in either of those, we got a bigger problem too, right? So I'll leave that as just a thought.
All right, Senator Orrock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've had the opportunity to talk a bit about this issue prior to the bill being drawn, and I appreciate Senator Beach bringing it and all the work that you've been doing to call attention to this. I will say that We all remember when some of us may remember when the crane over at the old Fulton Bag Cotton Mill, there was a fire, and the crane operator was trapped and was plucked out of the sky. And we had that young man, that firefighter, who saved that life on international television because CNN was there, down here to the Capitol. And his one and constant message was, please fund the equipment so that we can do the job. This is what we're trained to do. Back us up with investing the dollars. And you've made a compelling case, and I agree with the sentiment of your remarks about finding a way to do this that makes sense. And this question about pension and security and all of that is, I think, really merits taking a look at as part of the package. But we had the same discussion years ago in this city about we're underfunding our first responders and fire, and we're back kind of that same place again years and years later. So working out something like this makes so much sense to me, so that we don't keep repeating history. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
All right, and this is going to be the last one, Senator Dolezal.
I was going to piggyback off Chairman Albers. The usage here, when you said user fee, that clicked in my head, and I wonder actually if line 70 or 75 can be expanded to include direct costs with providing emergency services to that event. The other thing I'm wondering is if you intend to capture the convention business in this, because I think as it's written, you do capture the convention business. Because other venues on line 21 rated, it's open to the public and has a rated capacity of 9,500 people or more. I think you're capturing GWCC.
Yeah.
And maybe even other convention space in the state. Nothing comes to mind, it might be that large, but if you want to include that, then great. If not, I'm just kind of pointing out that I think it includes convention space.
I would just say this, Senator Dolezal, I'm not sure people buy tickets to go to conventions. I mean, they may go with their association with their dues, but I'm not sure they buy a ticket for $100 to go to the convention.
I think Comic-Con, where you absolutely would buy a ticket.
Yeah.
There are a number of events
Okay.
where you would. So if
Yeah,
your intention is to capture it, I would probably just exclude other venue.
Okay.
And restrict it to stadium, arena, amphitheater. I think
Okay.
that's probably what you want to capture.
That would be hard to do, I think, because of the differences in the convention business, but we will look at it, and I'll take that under consideration.
I forgot Senator Albers had one last question here, so.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. You know, I think Senator Hickman brought up a really good point. I don't know if we should set the threshold at any amount, because a rural community is going to have a smaller venue, but they might need the services just as much, maybe even more. So I think we got to give them the same opportunity to have that local control to do that. And the second thing is, I would like us to find something in this budget so if it's done, a local city or county that does this doesn't automatically just reduce their public safety budget and replace it with this. The goal is to be additive, right? So I just think we need to have that balance there.
Yeah, I think Senator Beach brought that up when we first discussed about making sure, 'cause we have a great mayor in Atlanta right now, but on a long enough timeline, you may have some reductions. So I definitely support that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't want this to be a honeypot of money and then take their annual budget and just get rid of it, if you will. So we talked about that, and we need to address that in here, and I'll take that under consideration. Thank you for that comment.
All right,
I would just, you got another question?
one more follow-up from
All
Senator
right,
Dolezal.
and then I'll close out.
Just a thought, Chairman Beach, if they do what Senator Hickman talked about, and you remove the 9,500 persons, this may apply to horse tracks.
Yeah.
So you want to consider.
Oh, I tell you what, and they're off. But hey, let me just say this in closing. Thank you all for hearing this bill. I'll tighten it up and make the changes and discuss all the comments we had with Mr. Bailey. But the intent of the bill is this: the role of government is to keep our citizens safe and to make sure we don't have disasters, and that if we do have something that happens, they have the proper tools in their toolbox to fight the fire or to go in and take care of whatever the crisis is. So I would just say I think the intent of this bill is a good bill. We just got to tighten it up, and I'll do that. And I thank y'all for your time, and we'll be back in touch. I will work with you, Mr. Chairman, to get another hearing.
And we'll check the legal issues and that
Okay.
as well and try to see what all our parameters are.
All right,
Thanks for bringing this forward.
thank you.
Mr. Chair and committee, thank y'all.
Thank you. I've got to step out for just a second, so Vice Chairman Albers is going to start this next process with you.
You done? Yes. Okay,
If you want to come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman,
My pleasure, Senator. Glad to have you today. Will you,
and members of the committee, thank you very much for hearing this bill that deals with Columbus, Muskogee County. I'm standing in for Randy Robinson, my colleague from Columbus, who could not be here today. This bill is simply an effort by Muskogee County, and it would allow other consolidated governments to do the same, to have a component that allows them to raise proceeds to use as maintenance as well as other projects. This is the only thing, because under current law, under the SPLOST program, they cannot use the funds for maintenance or buildings or whatever the case may be. This allows them to do that because of the strain, the financial strain they've experienced prior to COVID and all other time, but it's really getting to be, the buildings are getting older sometimes, and it just gives them another tool in their work box to get the job done and maintain the buildings or carry out the job properly. This is just an effort to get that done. Very simple. It amends the current law on line 30 to 33. You can see it there. Consolidated governments levying a tax authorized by this part may use the proceeds of such tax to establish a maintenance reserve fund for newly renovated programs authorized pursuant to the current code, provided that no more than 5% of those proceeds are deposited into such fund. And that's where the bill stands, Mr. Chairman.
thank you, Senator Harbison. I know this has actually come before this committee many times in my 13 years here of the use of a SPLOST or a LOST or a MOST or whatever OST we're using,
Yes.
depending on the day. There is sometimes a concern with how that's spent, because usually there is a project list that is associated with using those dollars for the city, whether it be a consolidated government or any other local government in Georgia. Wouldn't one of the options be to simply adjust the millage rate if there was a need for additional tax dollars for maintenance?
Well, that depends on whether the millage rate is too high already, or so high that they can barely pay it. It would be another permanent burden on the citizens of any county, not only Muskogee. Incidentally, this would affect only about 4 counties who are consolidated, which are consolidated in Georgia.
Understood. I guess your perspective then is, with it being a sales tax, that not just the residents but others who are coming into will share the burden, because ultimately somebody will be
Yes,
paying
sir.
for it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Questions from the committee members for the bill's author? Got a question from Senator Hodges.
Senator, one question. Why would this be a good bill for a consolidated city-county over a city and a county that's not consolidated?
Over what, I'm sorry,
Well,
Senator?
why would you just do this for consolidated city-counties?
Well, because we are in that category, and that's why we brought it forth in that context. And that's the only reason. But, you know, if you want to bring the whole state into it, I invite you to join us if you'd like to. But that's up to your mayor and city council and city managers. So.
All right, we've got a question from Senator Estevez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this goes off of Senator Hodges' question, and I don't know the answer to this, which is why I'm asking. But, are counties able to do this now? And
No.
it's only
No. They have to come and get this done. This would call for a referendum, They would do the referendum by the citizens of that particular county, of Muskogee and Columbus, and they say yeah, nay, and go with that. It has to be part of the splosh.
Well, yes, understood. But for example, can Cobb County, that is not consolidated, could they do this through a referendum, through their referendum now, save, put 5%? So
They cannot.
okay, so that goes to Senator Hodges' question.
I think they'd
Why
have to go
only-
through the process such as this, I would think.
Senator Eccles.
Thank you. So correct me if I'm understanding this incorrectly. This allows a consolidated government to basically levy a tax without having the voters vote on it.
No.
No?
No, that's not true at all.
Okay.
No.
Right.
Okay.
So if you
It
read
would
through
be
this,
part, if you have a splosh, you have to explain up front what the funds will be used for. This allows them to do it now, which they cannot do now, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
all right, Senator Dolezal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is either a question for the author of the bill or even for you, Mr. Chairman, given your initial questioning. Obviously, SPOS funds are tied to a project list. That project list goes before the voters. They vote on it. They approve it. We passed legislation, I believe, last year that allowed the collection of SPOS beyond the revenue amounts collected. So in other words, if they went for a $100 million SPOS in the old days, if $100 million came in, they had to stop that collection. We now allow for the SPOS to run over the amount and run for the duration of the time approved by the voters. I'm actually wondering if this is not a tool that could be useful, because I'm thinking about the municipalities when they run out of projects, but the money's still coming in. What do we expect them to do with that bill that we passed last year? And this very well may be a good use of that money. What's the impetus for your area? What was the kind of genesis of this request?
The city manager and the members of the council unanimously got together and asked it because we got a new project, we got dilapidated building. We have a crumbling government center. We have other projects in the city, areas that are blighted and things like that. They may be able to do the SPLOSH program, but they, at the same time, they would be burdened with trying to, like somebody mentioned earlier, raise taxes, which they don't want to do or have a problem doing, but they would want to make sure they have the maintenance money in place to keep those buildings current and all those projects current, in my understanding of it.
One more question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that explanation. On line 31, it says for newly approved projects. So
Yes, sir.
are you essentially, based on what you said before, functionally what they want to do to identify a need that was not on the original SPLOS list, but a maintenance need, not a new capital project need, and apply some SPLOS money to that maintenance need that was not on the original?
Yes, and they can't look back, right.
Got it. Thank you.
Senator Dolezal is bringing up a good point. You know, when that language was changed to allow a SPOS to continue, that was really driven a lot by the fact that our own Chairman Hufstetter passed the Marketplace Facilitator Act, and the collection of sales taxes soared because of that, right? I mean, a lot of them went exponentially higher than anyone could even imagine. So most of the SPOS are very flush, more so than they were considered. So I think getting back to, maybe I don't want to paraphrase what you're saying, but if that could be used for projects, and it sounds like most of these are capital projects anyway that you're talking about, my only concern is we're still using them for a project list that voters have approved for, because a maintenance fund, as an example, wouldn't be something that wouldn't be a specific project, right, that they're approving it for. But I would be curious to know, and perhaps either Department of Revenue or the local folks in your area could tell us how much additional SPOS dollars have been delivered over the last couple of years, to see how much larger that threshold is. Again, thanks to Marketplace Facilitator and other things.
Okay, well, even in there, but I would go back to the point that it explains clearly that it's for maintenance, and I don't think right now you can use maintenance money, or there's no avenue for them to use that context or that description, maintenance, to upkeep the projects they've already approved, or would approve under this bill.
Maintenance can be a subjective word, depending on what that is. Maintenance absolutely could be a capital project, depending on what it is.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay. Senator Tillery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this something, though, that would not be resolved if a consolidated government simply said maintenance, they couldn't say operations, of county buildings
I'm not
in
sure I
their call?
understand that, Mr. Chairman. I didn't quite understand your question.
I'll ask you offline. I'm wondering if this has got to go back to the voters anyway.
Right.
Why it can't just be, why we have to have a code change, why they can't just say in their call for the SPLOST, maintenance of county buildings or maintenance of city buildings, or I guess in your instance, maintenance of consolidated
Well-
government buildings.
Well, under this particular, the current law, I don't think that's allowed. You have to really give that piece approval at this level in order for them to be able to go back and do the SPLOST, would be my understanding.
Can I ask one follow-up, Mr. Chairman? Is what the city's seeking here to be able to pay the expenses related to staff, maintenance staff? Not bowlers or
That
roofs?
is beyond my understanding of
I gotcha.
what the bill is asking. It might not. I would think not, because that would, I just don't think, off the top of my head, it would not,
That's
but I
right.
wouldn't want to conclusively state that.
All right, I don't see any other questions, and I apologize for having to step out for a second. And I see the sponsor apparently didn't show up today. Is that what we hear? But yeah, we appreciate you bringing this forward. We wanted to just kind of get the basic information where we can digest it and
Yes,
look
sir.
at all the
Yes,
ifs,
sir.
ands, and
And
buts.
anything you need in that context, I'll talk to him about it, and I'll try to get it as well.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you for presenting this, and we'll look at this.
Thank you, members and Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. This meeting's adjourned.